Here today to talk to you about ADHD, attention deficit disorder. Is it real? Yes. What does it look like in children? What does it look like in adults? Does it go away? Does it remain for life? And most of all, what can we do about it? ADHD is real, and it comes in two forms. There's a genetic ADHD, and that is a neurological brain function or condition that's there from birth. It does run in families, and it can be recognized by looking at the history of the family. There's also an environmental form, and that form is caused by the environment, the food, the situation where a person is living. And honestly, most of us can feel ADHD at times when we're overstressed, we're overtired, we're over anxious, we get irritable, and we're just chaotic in our minds. The difference with an ADHD brain is that they cannot do anything about that. It's a normal state. It's a normal state of being. In a non-ADHD brain, there is a recognition of it and a realization that there needs to be something done, and this is not a normal state. In working with adults and talking with parents of children with ADHD, to be able to describe it from their perspective has been really, really valuable and actually breakthrough information. Because if we can speak to people who can recognize and explain to those of us who are working with children, teachers, especially, then we can understand how that brain works and how it feels, and then how we can help that young person to develop strategies and to be able to cope with living and being successful in their lives. An ADHD brain has information coming at it from all different angles. It's like having a telephone conversation, a television blaring, there's someone at the door, there's people talking in the background. We've all been in situations like that. But in that case, a non-ADHD brain can prioritize and pick out what's the thing that I need to focus on. An ADHD brain cannot do that. All the information is coming in at equal levels of volume and equal priority, and it's just chaotic. And that is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. ADHD does not go away. In adults, there's a lot of pain involved, and have many, many stories about people who have later in life recognized ADHD in their lives, and that there has been a lot of resulting pain and loneliness and after effects. And if only someone had recognized and understood and helped early in life, it would have made a life-changing difference. But this information now is very helpful to us in the child care business, and that is that we then can understand better, and we can provide the help and the strategies and the opportunities to help that young person so that it won't develop into secondary factors and even into mental health conditions later in life. ADHD in children is hard to recognize at the very earliest stages because most children are very active, their minds are all over the place, they are disorganized, they're overexcited, all of those things. With very young children, the energy, the lack of focus, the disorganization, the overactivity is pretty much common. For a 4-year-old to be doing those things is pretty much common. But if those conditions continue, then in a 10-year-old, it's very, very apparent that that 10-year-old is not developing. And they look very different from 10-year-olds who are not doing those things anymore. And I should add that it's obviously not okay that a 35-year-old who is still exhibiting those same symptoms and possibly having to calm themselves by having a couple of drinks and taking an hour to calm down after some kind of situation is certainly out of the norm. And we will be talking about self-medication which is part of the process, a very negative part of the process, if ADHD symptoms are not recognized early in life. Because in order to get any kind of relief from the chaos and the brain energy and the physical energy, people then start using chemicals such as alcohol or drugs or other kinds of behaviors to calm themselves, rather than looking at the real cause of that overstress and that overreaction. Why is there more ADHD? I would say that there's a lot more environmental influences. We mentioned before nutrition as being one, or lack of. Stress and disorganization in the world around, in homes themselves. Family stresses. The other would be lack of knowledge. And so part of the purpose of this presentation is to provide some basic knowledge for parents, for educators, for people who are working with children, to be able to look at what are the small things that indicate ADHD symptoms or genetic ADHD, so that we can address them more effectively and help kids earlier in their lives. The other reason for more is that there's a genetic form, which I've mentioned, and that it does run in families. But many times it's not recognized until the second generation. In my work with children, I'm finding that as we look at the child and the behavioral symptoms that are appearing in the home and in the schools, that when that child is looked at, then the parents recognize in themselves and very often in the grandparents. And that's one of the ways to recognize a genetic ADHD, that is by looking back on the history. But sometimes that can take a while, it can take years, and as I said, it can take a whole generation. There are many unplanned births, and young people who are unsuccessful in the school system, do not have an education, do not have a workplace, their finances are limited. They tend then to be together in social circles and then have children, and those children can be born with genetic ADHD coming from the parents. Another reason is that unrecognized genetic ADHD in families can be made worse by the use of punitive measures, because the behaviors can be very, very frustrating for adults, and that when we run out of things to do, people can turn to frustration and anger, and punitive measures make things much, much worse. There are many people that have been broken, and in working with adults, realizing that their lives have been scarred and damaged totally by the use of punitive measures, and it also passes on to the next generation. Early recognition is the key. So what I'd like to share is, what does ADHD or ADHD symptoms look like? In an adult, it can be a person who is constantly talking, a person who tends to step into a conversation, throwing in random topics. It could be a person who has always the best ideas, the big ideas, is always ready to share them, but then it looks like they never carry them out. An ADHD person can also look as if they don't notice anyone else around them. They're fairly focused on their own topic and what they're doing, and sometimes they come across as being very insensitive and not aware of people around them, because it's true, they're on their own focus. That kind of behavior in people in the workplace, or especially in a marriage, a relationship, or friendships, can be very frustrating and very irritating to other people. What does ADHD look like in a child? It's not quite the same. An ADHD child can be very active, very distractible, looking around the room. If they come in on a chair, they're curled up on the chair or lying on the chair or using the chair as a vehicle instead of using a chair as a chair. A fly across the room would take their attention away from almost anything. And the exterior noise that's going on around them. In a classroom, for instance, a car driving by, or a sound outside, or the wind. And as I mentioned before, their mind is like just a chaos of all kinds of information coming in. So because they cannot prioritize, the sound of that vehicle might take the priority. When children with ADHD are exhibiting these behaviors, and it's annoying and frustrating, if it is misinterpreted and not recognized, then it can be dealt with in a negative way. It becomes a behavior problem. And when the focus is on behavior and not interpreting the behavior and meeting the needs of that child and providing for that child's needs, then it can get into a negative interpretation. One of the secondary effects of unaddressed ADHD is oversensitivity and negative reaction. And these people tend to see any kind of contact of a person as a negative. They become defensive, trouble is coming, and they overreact in that way. The damage then begins because a person with a very negative view of themselves, and that adults around them, people around them are always coming for negative reasons, they become very negative in their outlook. I wrote an article recently for a popular journal, and in it I put 10 things to focus on that every ADHD child, actually every ADHD person, needs to hear. And I'll just share those with you today. Number 1 is to explain what ADHD is in terms that the person can understand, clear and simple, and what it looks like in that person. And this applies to adults as well. Number 2 is tell the person what is good about them. Be able to pull out the positive qualities, the energy, the interests, the creativity, the boundless physical attributes to be applied to sports or outdoor activities. Number 3 is to show them how their energy can be utilized. It needs to be structured and organized to get things done, so that they're not running around like a whirling dervish, starting things and never finishing them. Number 4, tell them honestly what irritates people around them. Most of the ADHD people who are unaware, they remain unaware of how their behavior affects other people. Why do people not want to be around them? Why do people get irritated when they butt into a conversation just because they want to get their idea across and they're really enthusiastic about it? A reality check is very, very important, and I call it a mirror. We all need mirrors in our lives. And to be able to build a relationship with a young person and be able to share honestly and know that you are out for their good and you honestly want to improve things for them is to share the negatives and the irritations that come on to other people from their behavior. Number 5, start showing them, opening up their view to new things in the world. Science is an amazing vehicle, the outdoors, amazing things like flying or extreme sports. Those are things that can utilize that boundless energy and open up their world. Number 6, show them how to organize their things. Ways the joke is about Post-it notes, but that can get disorganizing too. But to be able to keep things in one place, actually for children it's to help them and do the organizing for them until they get that sense of what it feels like. Because we're not born with these skills. An ADHD person needs much, much more support in that area of organization and time management, and how those things can reduce frustration in a life of spending an hour looking for something that you just had 2 hours ago. Number 7, show them how to use a calendar, memory helps, and help them keep track of time so that they can look back on what they've been successful at and what they've done, so that they can plan for the moment and the day, and that they can look to the future for good things that are going to happen, instead of constantly waiting for trouble. Number 8, show them how to relax. and to calm themselves, to take themselves away from the chaos, away from the noise, instead of running headlong into it, and to show them what it feels like to be in a calm state and that that's okay. An ADHD person is used to chaos 24/7, and so coming into a calm environment, coming into a calm place can feel wrong, it can feel abnormal, it can feel uncomfortable. Many children that I work with actually start to stimulate the environment, and that is they're either picking or scratching or talking or spinning around in a chair or poking or looking out the window and pointing out things that are happening because it feels unfamiliar, it feels uncomfortable. They can actually feel like they're sick, they're tired, or they're bored. But being able to experience a state of calm and regulation is an important part of the development of anyone, especially an ADHD person. Number 9, teach them about regulation and dysregulation, frustration and anger, to recognize what causes those things, what are the triggers, and what to do about it as early as possible. I can tell you that children as young as 5 and 6 can be taught what relaxation is and actually welcome it. And on the other hand, an adult in their late 40s or 50s, to be able to say honestly that they have never been in a calm state in their whole life is just concerning. And so to teach people relaxation strategies and how to focus their brain in a relaxed state is an amazing breakthrough, and I've seen it happen many times. Number 10, teach them how to focus on one thing at a time, how to organize their workspace so that there's not clutter all around, and to be able to see the positive outcomes of prioritizing and forcing oneself actually to set up a schedule, which feels uncomfortable at first, but it's like harnessing a brain. I like to think of an ADHD brain as a sparkler. There's the spark and the light and the fire, but it's just all over the place. And then to bring that brain into a structure and an organized place, and I don't mean dull, I don't mean boring. There needs to be energy and activity, but within some kind of structure, that intelligence and that creativity can share some light. If you would like to hear any more on any of the topics or any of the areas that have been introduced to you, I would be happy to come and share to a group in your home, in your school, or in a community event.